Ugly Story, the 1937 Haitian massacre. When historians talk about atrocity of the 20th century, we often think of those that took place during and between the two world wars. Along with the Armenian genocides in modern-day Turkey, the Republican King in China, and Kristallnacht in Germany. Another horrific ethnic cleansing campaign occurred in an island between the Atlantic Ocean and Caribbean Sea. The root of the conference goes back to 1492, when Christopher Columbus stumbled onto the Caribbean island that would come to be named Hispaniola, launching a wave of European colonization. The island's tiny natives were decimated by violence and disease, and Europeans imported large numbers of enslaved Africans to toil in profitable sugar plantations. By 1777, the islands had become divided between the French-controlled West and the Spanish-controlled East. A mass slave law, the Hui, is independent from the French in 1840, and it paid the world's first black republic. But the new nation paid dearly, shut off of the world's economy and settled with debt by its former masters. Meanwhile, the Dominican Republic would declare independence by first overthrowing Haitian rule of Eastern Hispania, later Spanish-American colonialism. Despite long and collaborative history shared by the countries, many Dominican elites saw Haiti as a racial threat that impaired political and commercial relations with white and Western nations. In the years following World War I, the United States occupied both parts of the island. It did so to curb this power in the Western Hemisphere by destroying the local opposition and installing U.S.-friendly government. The brutal racist nature of U.S. occupation, particularly along the remote Dominican-Haitian border, laid the foundation for bigger atrocity after its withdrawal. In 1930, Liberal Dominican President Horacio Vasquez was overthrown by the chief of this army, Rafael Trujillo. Despite being a quarter Haitian himself, Trujillo saw the presence of bicultural Haitians Dominican borderland as burst of threat to his power and an escape route for political revolutionary. In a chilling speech on October 2, 1937, he had no doubts about his intentions for reason. Claiming to protect the Dominican farmer from theft and incursion, Trujillo announced the killing of 300 Haitians along the border and the promise that the so-called remedy would continue. Over the next few weeks, the Dominican military, acting on Trujillo's order, murdered thousands of Haitian men and women, and even their Dominican-born children. The military targets black Haitians, even though many Dominicans themselves were also dark-skinned. Some accounts say that distinguish the residents of one country from the other, that killers forced their victims to say the Spanish word for partially. The Dominicans pronounce it Pedihil with a truly Spanish R. The primary Haitian language, however, is Creole, which does use the truly R. So if people struggle to say Pedihil, they will judge to be Haitian and immediately kill. Yet recent scholars suggest that tests like these weren't the sole factor used to determine who was being murdered, especially because many of border residents were bilingual. The Dominican government censors any news of massacre while bodies were thrown in ravines, dozens in rivers are born disposed of the evidence. This is why no one knows exactly how many people were murdered. The temporary estimates range from about 4,000 to 15,000. At the extent of carnage was clear to many observers. As the U.S. ambassador to the Dominican Republic at the time noticed, the entire northwest frontier on the Havon side is absolutely devoid of Haitians. Those not slain in the flight across the frontier are still hiding in the bush. The government tried to disclaim responsibility and blamed the killing of vigilant civilians, but Trujillo was condemned internationally. Eventually, the Canadian government was forced to pay on $525,000 in reparation to Haiti. But due to corrupt bureaucracy, barely any of these funds reached survivors or their families. Neither Trujillo nor anyone in his government was ever punished for this crime against humanity. The legacy of massacre remains a source of tension between the two countries. Activists on both sides of the border have tried to heal the wound of the past, but Dominica State has done little, if anything, to officially commemorate the massacre or its victims. Meanwhile, the memory of Haitian's massacre remains a chilling reminder of how power-hungry leaders can manipulate people in turning against their life neighbors. One more. When historians talk about atrocity of the 20th century, we often think of those that took place during and between the two world wars. Along with the Armenian genocide in modern-day Turkey, the rape of Nanking in China, and Christian laws in Germany, another horrific ethnic cleansing campaign occurs on an island between the Atlantic Ocean and Caribbean Sea. The roots of this conflict go back to 1492, when Christopher Columbus stumbled onto the Caribbean island that would come to be named Hispaniola, launching a wave of European colonization. The island's Taino natives were decimated by violence and disease, and the European imported large number of enslaved Africans to toil in profitable sugar plantations. By 77, the island has become divided between a French-controlled west and a Spanish-controlled east. A mass slave revolt won its independence from France in 1884 and became the world's first black republic. But the new nation paid dearly, shut out of the world's economy and saddled with debt by its former masters. Meanwhile, Dominican Republic would declare independence by first overthrowing Haitian's rule of Eastern Hispaniola and later Spanish-American colonialism. Despite long and collaborative history shared by these two countries, many Dominican slaves saw Haiti as a racial threat than imperial political and commercial relationship with white Western nations. In the years following World War I, the United States occupied both parts of the island. It did so to curb its power in the Western Hemisphere by destroying the local budgets and installing U.S.-friendly governments. The brutal, racist nature of the U.S. occupation, particularly along the remote Dominican nation's border, laid the foundation for bigger atrocities after its withdrawal. In 1930, Liberal Dominica President Horacio Vescovi was overthrown by Chief of this army, Rafael Trujillo. Despite being a quarter Haitians themselves, Trujillo saw the presence of bicultural patients in Dominican borderland as both a threat to his power and escape routes for political revolutionaries. In a chilling speech on October 2, 1937, he left no doubts about his intentions for the reason. Clinical to protect Dominica family from the thieves and incursion, Trujillo announced the killing of 300 Haitians along the border and promised that his so-called remedy would continue. Over the next few weeks, the Dominican military, acting on Trujillo's orders, murdered thousands of Haitian men and women, and even their Dominican-born children. The military targeted black Haitians, even though many Dominicans themselves were also dark-skinned. Some accounts say that distinguished their residents one up-country from the other, they killed for their victims to say the Spanish word for parsley. Dominicans pronounce is perejil with a tricky Spanish R. The primary Haitian language, however, is Creole, which does use a tricky R. So if people struggle to say perejil, they were just to be patient and they immediately kill. The recent scholarship suggests that tests like this weren't the sole factor used to determine who would be murdered, especially because many of border residents were bilingual. The Dominican government censored any news of massacre while bodies were thrown in Caribbean. Dumptings livers were burned to dispose of evidence. This is why no one knows exactly how many people were murdered. The contemporary estimates range from about 4,000 to 15,000. Yet the extent of occurrence was clear to many observers. As the U.S. ambassador to Dominican Republic at the time noticed, the entire northwest of the frontier on the Bourbon side is absolutely devoid of Haitians. Those not slain either fled across the frontier or are still hiding in the bush. The government tried to disclaim responsibility and blamed the killing on vigilant civilians, but Trujillo was condemned intentionally. Eventually, the Dominican government was forced to pay only $525,000 in reparation to Haiti, but due to corrupt bureaucracy, barely any of the funds reached survivors or their families. Neither Trujillo nor any Iranian government was ever punished for this crime against humanity. The legacy of a massacre remains a source of tension between two countries. Activists on both sides borders have tried to heal the wound of the past, but Dominican state has done little, if anything, to officially commemorate the massacre or its victims. Meanwhile, the memory of Haitian massacre remains a chilling reminder of how power-hungry leaders can remove people in turning against their lifelong neighbors.